Caseus, Jedi Master. Chapter 3. Wake up, Liara. Time to get started. Liara stirred and yawned and opened her eyes, seeing Caseus already dressed and ready to begin.
Okay, 5 minutes?
Now, Liara, my master didn't tolerate slacking. Neither will I. Get dressed and I'll be waiting outside. Liara sighed and got out of her bunk to get dressed, while Caseus stood outside staring at the water. His first official day of training a student. He was nervous, but he told himself he would take it a step at a time. He would make Master Takai proud. Liara stepped off the ship and joined Caseus, who held out a tough wooden stick to her.
What's this for?
Combat practice. We're going to use these for now. Liara took the stick and swung it around a few times before holding it steady in front of her. I'm going to start by teaching you the first and most basic form of lightsaber combat. Form 1. This will prepare you for learning other forms later on. First, I want you to attack me. I won't attack back. Once we have a foundation to build off of, we can start learning some different techniques. Ready?
Ready.
Cassius kept his makeshift weapon in front of him as Liara ran forward and struck at his legs. Cassius quickly and effortlessly blocked her attack as she swung for his arms. Once again, her attack proved fruitless as Cassius intercepted each blow with ease. Concentrate. Don't get distracted. Liara took a deep breath and ran at Cassius, leaping towards him and striking towards his head. Cassius raised his weapon in the air and caught her attack before swiftly ducking and dodging her following strikes. Liara was getting winded already as she continued to lay into her master as fast as she could. Cassius raised his eyebrows before catching her attack in a circle parry and spinning her stick from her hand. All right, I think I have a decent idea of how you fight. Grab your stick again. Liara sighed and picked up her practice saber. You're trying to attack me where I am, instead of where I'm going to be. Remember, dueling is not about brutish swings and stabs. It's not about how strong or fast you are. It's about reading your opponent, learning how they fight, and how to counter them. You need to be 3 steps ahead of your enemy when fighting them.
How am I supposed to do that?
By staying calm and composed. I notice when you fight, you're locking your elbows too much. Your footwork needs tweaking, and your grip on your weapon is too tight. Cassius walked behind her and adjusted her feet and stance, bringing her elbows down slightly and positioning her shoulders properly. It's important to stay light on your feet while keeping a firm, grounded stance. Keep your blade out in front of you, and a firm grip. Watch me. Cassius raised his weapon and took a deep breath before performing a basic series of strikes in perfect sequence. Look at how I'm not staying too rigid. I'm allowing my strikes to flow one after another, like water flowing from a spout. Cassius turned to Liara. Now you try. Liara looked determined as she stepped forward and tried to mimic the performance of her master. It wasn't perfect by any means, but she was beginning to understand the general idea. Remember, the Force is your greatest ally. Allow it to fuel you and guide your actions.
So the Force can make me fight better?
In a way. When you allow the Force to aid you, you'll find yourself moving in ways you may not have thought possible. Remember, the Force won't do all of the work for you, but it'll help guide your movements.
But how do I do that if I'm fighting?
It takes concentration. Some Jedi are more receptive than others. Corbin, my friend, was very attuned to the Force. As soon as he was in a battle, he was fearless. He was able to tap into the Force and harness its power easily. I was like you. I had a harder time when I was starting out. But everything takes practice. In fact, here's a Jedi exercise we used to do back at the temple. Cassius pulled a long strip of fabric from his pocket and tied it around Liara's eyes.
Hey, I can't see!
Exactly. Instead of relying on your outer senses, I want you to react on instinct. Listen to the Force. Let it guide you. Take a deep breath. Don't think. Feel. Liara sighed and held her stick out in front of her, as Caseus slowly and quietly began to encircle her, gently tapping the top of her head with his weapon.
Hey!
Caseus smiled and stayed quiet. His master messed with him the same way when he first did this exercise. It felt nice being the one in charge. Liara tried to concentrate and swung towards Caseus, missing by more than a foot before Caseus stepped behind her and gently poked her in the arm.
Cut it out!
Caseus swiftly evaded her attack and moved in front of her. Focus. You're focusing too much on your inability to see. Let the Force flow through you. It will guide you. Deep breaths. Liara huffed, but slowly took deep breaths in and out. Suddenly she seemed calmer, and lifted her wooden blade as Caseus carefully walked around to her left side and swung. In the nick of time, Liara raised her weapon and blocked it, as Caseus smiled proudly, before striking again at her leg. Liara hopped up, avoiding it before swinging down, cracking Caseus right on the knuckle. Ow! Liara lifted her blindfold and smiled, seeing Caseus hold his hand.
I got you!
Caseus chuckled. Easy. I only have one of these, you know. Liara grinned as Caseus looked at her proudly. Did you feel that? That energy inside you, telling you what to do?
I think so. I just did what I heard.
Always remember, Liara. The Force is your ally. You are one with it. The Force serves you just as you serve it. Come with me. We'll come back to combat later. Caseus and Liara walked over by the beach, where Caseus had set up 5 rocks in varying sizes. We're going to be lifting these stones first. Try the small one. Remember, envision it. Reach out and make it happen. Liara nodded and closed her eyes, holding her hand out over the smallest rock. With a bit of effort, she raised it into the air and gently set it back down. Now the other. Liara once again reached out her hand over the larger stone. This one was tougher. She caused it to budge and shake at first, and started to strain. Focus. With great effort, she lifted the stone a few inches before dropping it. Now the next one.
Caseus,
you can do this. Liara groaned and took a deep breath in before raising her hand over the rock, and concentrated. After over a minute of trying her hardest, the most she managed was moving the rock a half inch to the left. She finally stopped and sighed in frustration.
It's too heavy! I can't do it!
Caseus sighed and looked from Liara out to the sea, before closing his eyes and lifting his hand over the water, causing large ripples to form in a straight line before the waters separated, causing a large divide in the ocean stretching out 100 feet from the beach, leaving a dry path between the waters. As Liara stared in amazement, she turned around and saw all 5 of the rocks floating around her. Slowly exhaling, Caseus lowered his hand as the water returned to normal, and the rocks floated down gently. Liara was speechless as Caseus knelt down in front of her. There is no I can't. It was soon midday, and Caseus sat quietly as Liara focused intently on the stones. As the hours passed, she had managed to lift all but one of them. Surprising progress given her age. Liara was starting to sweat as she concentrated as hard as she could. You can do this. Focus. Clear your mind of distractions. Liara's face began to turn red before she finally lifted the largest of the stones into the air, a few inches before dropping it and falling to the grass, breathing heavily. Caseus smiled and walked over to her with a canister of fresh water. See? You can do it. Liara drank heavily from the canister and stared up at the bright blue sky.
Caseus, why is the training so hard?
If the ways of the Jedi were simple, there would be millions of us. As Jedi, we have to be prepared for the threats we come across. That's why we train so hard. Caseus sat next to Liara in the grass. This has been a productive first day so far. And you're only going to get stronger.
Okay. I have a question.
If this is about lightsabers...
No. Well, yeah, but How do they work?
Caseus removed his lightsaber from his belt and showed it to her. In concept, it's fairly simple. Caseus used the Force to slowly dismantle the lightsaber as the pieces floated into the air. The blade is produced by focusing high-energy plasma into a single contained blade. But the way it's done is a bit more complicated. Caseus floated the green kyber crystal into his hand. This is a kyber crystal.
Kyber crystal?
Yes. The crystal is the heart of the lightsaber. Without a kyber crystal, it's just a piece of metal.
Like batteries?
Sort of. Kyber crystals are what power the weapon. But there's so much more than that. The crystal is attuned specifically to the Jedi who harvests it. Once a Jedi has made their connection to it, it becomes a part of them. Cassius carefully reassembled the weapon and ignited the blade. Once the lightsaber is complete, it becomes an extension of yourself. A weapon with which you are in complete harmony with. Cassius shut off the saber and handed it to Liara, who looked at it nervously before taking it. Go ahead. Just be careful. Liara smiled and stood as she activated the lightsaber and stared in awe at the glimmering emerald blade.
It's heavier than I thought.
I thought the same thing when I built it. But once you've trained... Cassius took the saber and stepped away from Liara, performing a perfect attack sequence and ending with a flourish. The weight becomes nothing to you. Cassius shut off his saber and clipped it to his belt. Once you reach an age where I feel you're ready, you'll begin training with a real lightsaber. But until then, Cassius tossed her stick back to her as she caught it. Sticks will suffice. Cassius and Liara spent the rest of the afternoon training, with Cassius running her through basic Form 1 drills. By the end of the day, Liara was exhausted, and Cassius was pleased with his first day as a master. Sitting by the campfire, Liara ate her food with a healthy appetite, as Cassius sipped his drink and looked up at the stars in the sky. He felt a melancholic joy staring at such a view. Years ago, he and Sarah's favorite pastime was sitting on top of the temple and staring at the night sky. He missed those days.
Cassius?
Yeah?
Who gave you that thing around your neck?
Cassius looked at Liara and down at Sarah's braid. A long time ago, I trained with another Jedi Padawan. Her name was Sarah. And I loved her. You remind me a bit of her, actually. She was so stubborn, so cocky, so beautiful.
She died, didn't she?
Cassius looked down at the fire and nodded. She did. She gave me this as a gift. A token of our love. A promise that we would be there for each other when times got difficult. It's all I have left of her. Cassius held the braid close and closed his eyes, feeling Liara's hand on his. Cassius looked at her and ruffled her hair.
Mom says when people die, they aren't really gone. They're still with us. Maybe she's still with you.
Cassius looked up at the stars and smiled. She was still with him. He could feel it.